Okay, so far we've only really looked at what we can do with an MP3 file that we've imported. Now we want to look at actually creating some of our own, and what you might well want to do is be able to talk yourself, have it record on the microphone, in which this case is my USB microphone, and then I might want to mix that up with the music. So if I want to create a podcast, I want some talking on there and some music on there and things like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this record feature up here. Before I do that, I'm just going to move my playhead to the beginning by clicking this start one. So that puts my playhead back to the beginning. The other thing though is as soon as I start recording, my playhead's going to come across here, so I'm going to hear this song going on in the background. I don't really want that, so what I'm going to do is before we start I'm going to mute this one. So now I've muted it, it's basically not going to, we're not going to hear that, but it's still there. So I'm going to start recording. This is Mr. Morgan. Basically this is an Audacity tutorial. We're going to use my speech along with some music, and we're going to see how that all goes together. I'm going to count now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the reason I've done that was to show you what these different soundtracks come out looking like. So now I've got two different tracks going on there. Now if I turn my mute back off, so I've got both on, and I now play from a position somewhere by here maybe, listen to what happens. This is Mr. Morgan. Basically this is an Audacity tutorial. So you can hear the music going on and you can hear me talking. Now sometimes what you might want to happen is you might want to hear some talking and you might want some music going on in the background. So we're going to, later on we'll have a look and see how we can mute this down in some way to make the speech more interesting. But you saw already, if I hit mute, it turns this off. The opposite of that is to do what's called solo. So if I click solo, it basically mutes all the other tracks apart from the one that you're working on. Now in this case we're working on the one that I've just recorded. We could possibly have lots and lots of tracks on here. We don't have to be limited to just two, and we can move them around as however we wish. But what we're going to have a look at, I did some counting on purpose. We're going to try and get to that position and see if we can find it. I'm going to count now. 1, 2. So you can see, I'm going to count now. 1. Turn that off a moment and stop it. These were the positions. I think this was where 1 was. 1. Yeah. 2. So these are a good illustration of showing how you can move things around. So what I want to be able to do is I'm going to actually take the 1 and I'm going to put it between the 2 and 3. So it sounds very strange, but I want to show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to grab this bit here and I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to go in this position here and I'm going to paste it in. And again, at the moment this is all seamless, this is all still one piece. So if I go back and test now, listen. 2, 1, 3, 4. But it still sounds very accurate. Okay, something else we can do is we can actually put some silence in and get rid of the bits in between. So if, for instance, I've got a pause here, in my pause I want it to be quiet, I can just insert my silence into that one and it will make it much cleaner listening between my talking. So I won't hear any background noise basically. Let's try again. Now, 2, 1, 3. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut some of this out and move it around. So this is my speech. I'm going to find the end of, before I start counting, so I'm going to find the end of it. Together. I'm going to count now. So goes together. I'm going to go from about here and I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to move my playhead much further along and I'm going to paste it in place. So now I've got two separate clips. So what will happen is when I get from here, this position here, if I have this one switched back on, so I'll take this back off so I can hear everything. So what should happen is I'm going to hear both things going on at the same time, then only music, and then I will hear myself talking over the music again. How that all goes together. I count now. 2, 1. So obviously that sounds a bit strange. We're going to use the envelope tool to change some volume levels. Before I do that, I'm actually going to move this gap so it's not quite as big, so it doesn't take as long to do this demonstration. So you need to make sure as well, this is worth checking, that you haven't got anything on pause. Sometimes pause can be switched on and it makes it seem like nothing's working because it's actually paused the motion. So pause is not switched on. I'm going to use this time shift move tool, grab this track and make the gap a bit smaller there between the two tracks. Then I'm going to come up to this one. I'm going to actually go to mute this one now, and I'm going to come up to this top one, and I'm going to use the envelope tool, which is this one. So if I apply my envelope tool onto this one, so I've selected that whole thing, choose my envelope tool. Now what this allows me to do, you can see straight away we've got some blue bars and grey bars have appeared, and I've got this funny little icon. The funny little icon lets me set some marker points in. So if I go somewhere and click, it produces a couple of dots. I'm going to go a little bit further along and I'm going to do the same thing again and click again. Now I can drag and you can see what's happening. This is the volume of the tracks basically. I can change what's happening with them. So I'm going to mute the whole thing down quite quickly from the beginning so that the noise of the audio of the soundtrack of the music is much quieter than my talking. But in the middle bit here, where there's no talking going on, I'm going to bring the volume back up again. So I'm going to choose a couple of points. I'm going to go for here, and then I'm going to go pretty much in line, and I'm going to drag upwards. So it's getting louder at that position. I'm going to move across again. I'm going to put 2 points, and then a little bit further and 2 points. And again, I'm going to drag down to make the volume quieter again afterwards. And I can actually move these so that the volume starts pretty much where my gap is. I'm doing this by eye now, but I'm trying to line things up a little bit better, make them a bit more even, and I can bring this one in more so it doesn't happen as quickly. Now you can play around with this stuff as much as you want until it sounds correct. I'm going to try it just like that for now, and we'll listen to it and see what it sounds like. So I'll unmute this one so they're both switched on. I will get my starting point and I will come about here somewhere, and we'll listen and see what that all sounds like. See how that all goes together. I'm going to count now. 2. So you can see how that can be quite effective. We've managed to use 2 different tracks together and move them all around. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of my track and move it over up onto this top one so it carries on, just to show you how you can time shift between tracks as well. So I'm going to probably get rid of this end bit here, and I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to grab some of this one here. This is just for the demonstration. Obviously it's not going to make much sense, but I'm going to cut that one out, and this time I'm going to come up onto this top track and I'm going to paste it. I've got a gap between the two. Now what I could do is I could just drag that along and move it to where I want it to do, or I can do something else. I can actually use Control and J to join the tracks together. So that's what I'm going to try and do next. I'm going to hold down Control and press J and see what happens. Before I do that, I might just mute this track to stop anything happening to it. And we'll make sure we're selected up here, and we'll do Control J. And as you can see, Control J now has joined those things up, so now it's one continuous track. You can have some fun with Audacity. There's a lot of things you can do with what's called effects. Now Audacity comes with quite a lot of effects, but you can actually download extra ones and put them in there. If we come over here, and I'll highlight a little bit now, and we'll just test what I'm actually saying. So I'll just play by hitting spacebar in that selection. Basically this is an Audacity. So I'm just going to extend that out by shift clicking, so I've got a little bit more. And I'm going to, because this is the bit that's selected, if I put an effect on, it's only going to affect that little part. So the first thing I'm going to do to it is I'm going to have a little look, and I'm going to do something called change of pitch. Now if you wonder how Alvin and the Chipmunks talk funny, it's basically because this has been done. Now I was playing with this just now. It will start off on 0%. And depending upon whether I pull my slider to the right or to the left, it makes the pitch go one way or the other way. So this is, I'm going to preview it. I'm going to move it up to, so you heard what it sounded like just now. I'm going to move it up to about 50 and then hit preview and listen.
This is Mr. Morgan, and basically this is an Audacity tutorial.
If I make it even more fast, move it up to like about 90 something.
This is Mr. Morgan, and basically this is an Audacity tutorial.
So it doesn't actually make the track any quicker or any slower. It just changes the pitch of what's being said. If I go the other way, I go into minus numbers, We'll try maybe minus 50 and see what that one's previewing like.
This is Mr. Morgan. Basically, this is an Audacity tutorial.
Okay, that one's a bit too much. Just maybe put that halfway and try again, see what it sounds like. Put it to about 25, 26, that'll do.
This is Mr. Morgan. Basically, this is an Audacity tutorial.
So it's actually really easy to change somebody's voice to how they sound. Now, at the moment, all I've ever been doing is previewing. It won't make any changes until I click OK. If I change and click OK, it makes that change a permanent one. So you've got to be very careful before you do this, because if you make it permanent, it's very difficult to get back out of it again. So if you're going to do anything like this where you're potentially going to mess your work up, it's always good to make a second copy of it before you go any further. Now I'm just going to cancel out of this. Now, in fact, talking of that, we haven't saved our work at all yet, so probably what we should have done was to go to File and Save Project. Now, we can save an Audacity project. Don't worry about this command here. And we need to tell it where to go, so I'm just going to call this one Test and save it into a folder I've got on my desktop. So at least now I can close it, go away, come back next lesson, and I can carry on working on it if I choose to. The last thing I want to show you really is just how to now export at the end and turn all of our work into a different file, into an MP3. So I'm going to tidy it up a little bit. I'm going to just get rid of some of the end of this bit so it's not as long. So to demonstrate this, I don't need to show you as much. I'm going to take the solo off. I'm going to come up to here and I'm going to delete that back out. So I've got rid of that track. I'm going to fill up the zoom so it goes. So this is the length of my track now, and I want to be able to actually save that as an MP3 file. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Export this time. I'm going to go back to the folder I've got on the desktop. I've got one called Audacity here where I'm going to save my work, and I'm going to change, instead of using a WAV file, I'm going to choose one called MP3, and I'm going to call it Test MP3, just so I know the difference when I look at them later, and I'm going to hit Save. Now it's going to give me some warnings. It's basically telling me it's going to mix all these together into just the two tracks, which is fine, the left and right stereo. Click OK. If I wanted to put any metadata in, now this is the kind of information that you get coming out when you see things on iTunes and whatever. I could edit this to kind of make it mine, because it's still got bits of tracks of real ones in there. Maybe I'll just clear all of that and get it back to nothing. I could, if I wanted to, put my name as the artist name in and stuff like that. And then when I'm happy with it all, I'm just going to hit Save. And that will now turn that into a MP3 track. If I go into my folder, okay, there's the folder, and there's the one, Test MP3. And if I open that one, this is Mr. Morgan. Basically, this is an Audacity tutorial. We're going to use my speech along with some music, and we're going to see how that all goes together. I'm going to count now. So you can basically see how it all works. That's what the final track would have sounded like.